Welcome to the 4Cs podcast for SAP Business One, brought to you by Third Wave Business Systems. I'm Mike Ham, and my colleague Tyson McMurrin, bringing you a podcast that takes a deeper dive into the ERP system that is SAP Business One. We'll be hosting product experts and members of the Business One community, helping you, a Business One user, get the most out of SAP Business One. Hello and welcome back. Here we have episode 10, a special episode here. We're going to cover SAP Business One's 10.0 release. Let's jump right into it. We're going to do a top 10 for the 10th episode. Going to keep it all in tens here for us. Tyson, let's discuss the top 10 highlights that we found, most interesting, most impactful.
Yeah, Mike, it feels good to be here and to not have a quote for first thing and just get right into it. So Mike, as always, SAP has a document that they release that has all of the functionality, all of the bug fix, all of the platform changes that they've made. In the show notes, we can share that link to it. I think it's like an 80-page document. So for us to go page by page on this doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. So highlighting it into the top 10 highlights makes probably the most sense.
We can start with number one, the web client.
It is something that the SAP Business One community has been asking for some time now. And what's nice about it is they are using the SAP Fiori principles when they designed this. And unfortunately, the web client on this release is only focused around creation and processing of sales type documents. So creating a sales quotation, a sales order, an accounts receivable delivery, and an accounts receivable invoice. There's also going to be the ability to view listing reports such as purchasing documents, and you can also do SAP Business One partner and activity updates and also item updates. So overall, a lot of functionality around kind of that sales front end, which makes a lot of sense for the first release of a web client to be on that front, because generally the sales team is the team that's out in the field performing SAP Business One type transactions and would need a client like that.
Absolutely. And that's something that we've seen at some of the user group feedback forums, is something that's been asked for similar to that. So great to see that they've delivered on that, and a couple other changes that I know I saw in some of those sessions I would sit in on.
Yeah, one of the big things, Mike, to kind of stress on this is that it's only supported using Google Chrome or Firefox right now.
Yep.
So you would, if you're on an iOS device, you're going to need to install Firefox or Chrome. And the other thing is that this isn't really going to address any of the uniqueness of your business processes, like a portal platform would allow you to do. So this is just going to basically allow you to replicate out the SAP marketing documents. The other area of concern with this is if you do have any kind of extendability products like APP, credit card add-on, anything like that, that functionality is not going to be working on the web client because it's not installed on the web client, it's installed on the SAP Business One client. Yep. So, your add-ons and those types of things that you're used to having, that functionality is not going to come out into the web client functionality.
Yeah, those are good things to keep in mind too.
But overall, very excited to see SAP taking that step forward. I know, like you said, it's something that the user community has been asking for a long time.
Yeah. And number two, the new user interface, the Belize Deep, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I love this. I think that was one of the coolest things about the release is that new sharp redesign.
Yeah, Mike, as a colorblind accountant, I just care about the numbers and whether or not they're accurate, and that they're getting into the system as efficiently as possible. But yeah, the skin is nice. It's got a nice look and feel. The dashboard look with that color background seems to be really, really nice. The big thing that kind of jumped out at me with this skin is two things. One is that it is for SAP HANA only.
Yep.
So if you're on SQL, you're not going to have this skin. So that was one thing that jumped out at me. The second thing that jumped out is it's going to support a 4K monitor. So if you got that nice expensive monitor on your desk, you're going to be able to fully utilize all of the usable space.
Yeah, if you got a nice gaming monitor, your SAP Business One just looked a lot nicer now.
Yep.
Right. Number 3 is tab level changes. There's a couple of these, right?
Yeah, I kind of snuck this into, we limited ourselves to the top 10 being episode 10, version 10. We thought we'd keep with the 10, but there's a couple things that SAP's done around the tabs that is really nice to see. The first thing that they've done is they've supported the ability to put attachments into some additional documents. So for example, journal entry, production order, and timesheet. The ability to put attachments there is really nice. There's a couple of other documents that they added that to. So just the ability to, drag and drop your attachments or browse and attach an attachment into your records, especially around journal entry being the accountant.
Yep.
It's nice to have your supporting information to that journal entry attached to the document. So that was the first thing that I wrapped into this number 3. The other thing is that they've added the ability to perform tab level authorization. So in the business partner master data, you can control the tabs that a user is authorized to access. So now if they're only allowed to add addresses and contacts and they don't have access to any of the accounting tabs, you can now remove those. This is a huge highlight, and it's really going to help prevent human error and really kind of protect the data. And then also from a productivity standpoint and training standpoint, for those users that you don't need to explain what those tabs are anymore because they won't even see them.
Yeah, that's nice. And number 4, enhancements in the approval process.
Yeah, so Mike, this is hitting one of our C's, the communication and control.
When I first saw this putting it in, our 4C control, that's what jumped out at me and hit me immediately.
Yeah, so SAP's added a little bit of features around the approval process. The first thing is the ability to have visibility into last updated by and last updated on fields within the approval screen, so you can see that. And the authorizer and originator can add the document now. So, it really kind of allows you to see that information and it gives a little bit more insight into reducing the amount of back and forth between the user and originator. And it really simplifies that approval process and adds more flexibility around it. So this one is a nice highlight of an improvement into the approval process.
Yeah, and this was a good one to see. Number 5, interactive Gantt chart.
Yeah, so SAP, starting in version 9, really started to add functionality around projects. And it's nice to see that they're continuing down that road. They've now added an interactive Gantt chart into the project phases, and you can interactively go in and update and change the planning information around that. So you can add the project due date and finish date, and you can move, extend, and shorten the Gantt chart interactively. So everything kind of scales according to that. So just really, adding that additional functionality around the project management in SAP Business One, and ultimately, a lot better visual planning for your project tasks.
Absolutely. And the enhanced flexibility of that, we all know when you start a project, it's never going to go exactly how it was, outlined in the meeting room, right? And having that interactive chart that you can, be more flexible with, that's really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, add button changes.
So number 6 is probably one of my favorites on here.
I know you were excited about that when we were putting this together.
So as a user, you can kind of define how you want to add a document. So if I'm doing data entry, and before I would hit add a new and continue on. But there were a lot of users that would want to add the document and then view it, and then maybe print it afterwards. So the whole automation of entering the document, adding it, and then printing automatically, picking it up. So they've added functionality around the add button. So you can add a new, just like before, where you would add and then you're into a new document. You can add and view, so the document that's added is now in a display mode and in view mode. And then if you needed to edit anything, it would then go back into that update state. And then you can also add and close. So really nice that it's not just save and close, and then you have to reopen a marketing document.
Yep. Not that long, monotonous process. You're not restarting every single time. It's going to be a huge time saver. It was, that's straight from the users, right? That's straight from the users going, this has taken me way too long as far as the workflow is concerned. Why can't I have this just start from this point as opposed to going back to the beginning every single time?
Right.
Yeah. Number 7, hide blank lines and addresses. This one you also got pretty jacked up about.
Yeah, so in SAP, there's blank lines that show up in the address lines when you add it to the marketing document, and you'd always be going in and editing the crystal report to ignore those lines, but then somebody would use it later, and then it wouldn't show up on the printed report, and then we'd have to go and change the printed report so it would show up.
Talk about it like as if it's a business address, which it typically would be, and then you'd have that second line be like a suite address.
Yeah, so the suite address, if you didn't have a suite, the address, that blank line would show up in the printed document. So you would have Mike Ham, 123 anywhere, and then space because you didn't have a suite.
Yeah.
And then Wayne, New Jersey, right? So now that blank space is going to be scalable, that it's going to hide that blank line and on the address.
It's good. It's good to see.
Yeah, and this is one that, again, at the user conferences, there was always feedback to SAP around, there's got to be a better way.
Absolutely. And number 8, service layer for SQL supported.
So number 8 is probably the biggest change for a lot of the SAP Business One community, and it's a platform change that is happening on the back end that isn't really going to necessarily affect an SAP Business One user, but it is going to affect the SAP Business One customer. Yep. So historically, if I wanted to do any kind of integration with SAP Business One and I was on SQL, I would have to use the DI server or the DI API in order to interact with SAP. So for example, we talk a lot about e-commerce projects, for example, Mike. So if we use the DI API, the technology was a little bit slower than the service layer as far as responsiveness. And the other thing that was happening is as SAP Business One adds new functionality, for example, timesheets, those objects that were added as functionality within the SAP Business One core were not getting added to the DI API, but they were available and exposed in the service layer. So before, if you were on SQL and you were doing something like projects, you didn't have the ability to interact using a web interface to interact with that data set within the core. So so now with service layer being supported, it's going to do two things. One is it's going to allow companies like Third Wave, who have products like Versago and BizWeaver, to be able to use a single type of connection, whether it's a SQL database or HANA database, in order to connect to SAP Business One. So service layer being the way to connect. And the second is that a lot of this functionality that before we would tell customers, well, unfortunately we can't get that because you're on SQL. That information is now exposed using the service layer. So now we can actually interact with that data set.
And that's excellent. This is going to benefit, like you said, the Business One customer tremendously, because it's going to allow us as partners to serve you better. And that's excellent to see.
Yeah, and the other thing is it really kind of allows us to kind of focus in on a single solution as far as functionality. So from a development perspective around a product like BizWeaver, for example, like our e-commerce integration product, instead of having to support both DI, API, and service layer, doubling our testing time, doubling all of those types of things. Not only are we now going to have all the objects exposed and available to us, but it's also going to allow us to build better products faster, because we're not going to have to test, two different ways of connecting to the database and writing to the database. So it really is going to allow us to streamline our development efforts.
Yeah, and that's exciting to see.
Yeah. And Mike, number 9 was one that you were jacked up about.
I love this, because particularly working from home, we've seen this huge push to the cloud. Microsoft obviously jumped on this at the right time to making all of their Office products, 365, and everyone's able to log in from home. It goes hand in hand too with that web client thing. It's just, I don't know, it's great to see remote access really becoming mainstream and becoming, what we do now. This is how we work. This is how we log in. This is how we connect.
Yeah.
And that brings us to number 10, final one, the 64-bit client only. Tyson, tell us a little bit more about this one.
So this one's a good and bad, Mike. Obviously most technology is driving towards 64-bit from a programmability standpoint. But before, SAP Business One had a 32-bit client and a 64-bit client.
Yep.
And now with the 64-bit client, it's gonna allow companies like Third Wave that build SAP Business One add-ons to be able to just focus on one build instead of having 2 builds. So it's going to simplify us, when we're developing the installers and that kind of stuff. So so it's good from that perspective, but it's also a little bit of a concern for anybody that has like a legacy add-on. When you upgrade to SAP Business One 10, if your legacy add-on is only 32-bit supported, your add-on's no longer going to work, because you won't be able to install or get that add-on to start, because the 64-bit client does not have the 32-bit client behind it anymore in order to start those 32-bit software add-ons. So this is one where if you have a legacy system, legacy add-on that's 32-bit, you're going to have to be aware of that and have a look at it. But it's also a good time to maybe look at what that add-on was actually doing for you, and analyzing whether or not SAP has addressed that functionality in the build since the last time you've upgraded, or looking at software providers that are building into that 64-bit. So if you have any concerns, or if you want some opinion or some insight into this, just reach out to us and we can help you look at your environment and analyze whether or not you're at risk for this. So, this one's kind of a good and bad.
Yeah, it's something to keep in mind. Much like what we talked about in the web client. They're just, there's things that you have to be cognizant of if you're going to make these changes and make this jump. And these are things that you got to be aware of.
So, overall, SAP version 10, I think SAP's done a good job of addressing functionality additions, but also some of that usability. But they have made some back end, platform changes that aren't necessarily going to affect most customers, but they are good to know and to be aware of, because they might affect you. And ultimately, like you said, on a go forward basis, SAP and your software providers are going to be able to develop, test, and deploy software a lot faster with a single platform of connectivity and a single client that we're building to. So instead of building installers for 32 and 64-bit, we can just build a 64-bit installer now, and away we go.
Agreed. And with this 10.0 upgrade, what stuck out to me was how much SAP listened. Right, you see all these little enhancements, all these little workflow changes to make the system more user friendly, and that's excellent to hear. So, if anything, it sends a message back to SAP users from SAP. We are listening. Keep identifying changes that you want to see, and keep reaching out to us. Reach out to us here at Third Wave. Reach out to your partner and let us know what you want to see, so SAP can make those changes. Because as you can see, from what I saw in the user group meetings, they are listening, and that's great to see.
Yeah, and Mike, the other big thing is, I think we at the podcast, have really kind of identified the right C's, because if you look at what SAP is doing, they're not just focusing on the core, right? They're focusing on the connection, they're focusing on the communication, they're focusing on control, they're focusing on the core functionality as well. So maybe they're listening to the podcast.
All 4 C's are addressed in this top 10, and that's what I couldn't help but see as we went through each of these, as how each C just kept jumping out and showing itself.
Yeah.
As the original SAP Business One Gold Partner in North America, Third Wave Business Systems in Wayne, New Jersey partners with hundreds of growing businesses, and we work hard to ensure that every one of them is grounded in the 4 C's. With SAP Business One at the core. Connected with their business ecosystem, enabling everyone to communicate with the core, and empowered with the control needed to thrive in a digital world. The 4 C's, Third Wave, and you. Talk to us.
Mike, I would say that we've upgraded probably about 10 clients so far to version 10. Overall, the upgrades have been fairly painless and straightforward. There are a couple performance things. So if you have updated to version 10 and you're having some performance challenges, we know how to fix those. So reach out to us and talk to us, because we can help you with that. So if you feel stuck, if you feel like you're on an island and nobody's listening, we here at the 4 C's are here to, help get you connected into the right people in order to, sort that out. And obviously at Third Wave, we've done some of these upgrades. We're aware of some of these changes, and it's part of our upgrade checklists. And we're probably going to have a podcast about that in the future. Just how to test and what to look for when you're upgrading to a major release, like from 9 to 10 in this case.
Excellent. Well, Tyson, thank you as always. This wraps up episode 10 version 10.0, the 10 things that we like. Tyson, thank you. Listeners, thank you as always. Reach out to us at Third Wave. Find us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Let us know what you think of version 10. Let us know, what are the things that you want to see in future versions. We'd love to hear it. So for us at Third Wave, signing off. Thank you.
Yeah, and just last thing, Mike, is in the show notes, we're going to have a blog that we wrote about this, and we'll also include the 80-page document for you to review and look at. And until next time, take care and stay connected.